You're listening to The Dental Guys, Episode 17, Show Us Your Fractures. This week, Brad the Dental Lab Guy joins Wes and John as they discuss how the Academy of Osseointegration meeting changed what we are doing daily. Is zirconium really fracturing? And how do we overcome it? Is pink composite really great for aesthetic situations? How do we maintain it? How do we do it? You'll find out this week on The Dental Guys. Well, I'm Wes the Dental Guy, and welcome to this week's show of The Dental Guys.
Yeah, I'm John the Dental Guy.
Brad the Dental Lab Guy showed up, can you believe it, right here in studio.
Person, man.
If you call this a studio, I mean, it's kind of like
a studio-ish.
A studio, isn't it?
Yeah.
You were saying you got to bring yours home so we can do more of this remotely.
That'd be nice. A live guest is kind of nice. Face to face is cool.
It is kind of cool.
It's very cool.
It is kind of cool. So, today's been a pretty good day. Brad came down to my office, and we've been doing some pretty cool stuff. We set up to kind of shoot some videos from procedures to use for lecturing purposes and teaching and that kind of thing, and it really went well. We did 4 immediate extractions, immediate placements. One of those was a number 3 with that huge furcation.
That's bold.
And it was bold, and it went well.
It went real well.
Oh my goodness, the custom tissue former on that thing.
It was beautiful.
It was
sweet.
I mean, it
so
was
it's bold
textbook.
and beautiful.
It really was. It was.
Nice way to hold the graft material in.
Oh, love custom tissue formers. And we know from just recently, being in lectures, how these custom tissue formers are starting to see them pop up more frequently.
Definitely.
And I think it's something that we could talk about in another show. But yeah, it was a good day. We just went out to eat. Took Brad out to a good place in town and filled him up. So he's
filled me up. I think I barely walk out of here. I think
see, I'm on this special.
I was hoping
diet
you'd
right
mention that because there's a whole other side of that. Brad ate we're not going to say how many calories probably, but you ate
a pancake the size of the plate with a big chunk of chicken in the middle, and I sit next to Wes, who says,
how many calories? Wes, how many calories per day are you currently eating? You just need to document it.
Currently, and I'm not afraid to tell. Currently, I'm eating 500 calories a day, and I am at day
out.
like 15 or 16. I can't even remember now. It gets kind of cloudy as you go on. But today was actually an apple day because I'm doing this particular diet that I'm doing that to kind of reset my hypothalamus. And but yesterday, for some odd reason, I gained a pound, like when I weighed myself this morning. And so I'd been losing consistently, like from the time I saw you this weekend, John, when we went out to eat at the quote-unquote awesome Cuban restaurant that I did not eat at.
I think it was just you probably...
Yeah, I must have. But for some reason, so I did an apple day today. So 500 calories of apples.
I'm sorry. It's just hilarious, man. I mean, I know you're doing it. I respect it. Don't get me wrong here, Wes. I respect it.
Right.
But, man, it's crazy.
You got to check out my new coffee mug.
Did you make that at craft class?
The girls did.
That's pretty nice.
So we're walking after supper by down the street, and in the windows these coffee mugs, and we all stopped and I said that'd be cool for the guys.
I like that. I like that.
They had one with a tongue hanging out.
Yes.
That'd be even cooler.
Malia picked that one out.
That was
great.
Awesome. That's great.
Yeah, it's ugly mugs.
That's perfect. Well, I know that the last few shows, we kind of took a little bit of a turn toward talking a lot about financial stuff. We talked a lot about practice management stuff. But, all this discussion over the last, 6 to 8 weeks, we've been talking a lot about what came out of the Academy of Osseointegration meeting. When we were at this meeting, all 3 of us were there. And of course, Wes, you and I had a show where we recapped the AO a little bit, some of the things that we picked up from that. And we talked a lot about some new ideas about what integration is and all that. But You know, one of the things that we were really excited to have is to have Brad with us at the AO meeting.
I mean, from the lab's perspective, though, you look at it, you show up. That used to be kind of, and how long did they do like a lab track? And they've done that.
There was, yeah.
Yeah.
I took 3 courses from lab track, so.
Yeah. Yeah, some of that is good, and some of that's not so good. But I think you go to any bigger thing like that, and you're going to have to kind of wade through some of that. But you immediately, that last dinner we had, we're sitting there on the last night. I love it, and you're drawing on our tablecloth about things that we're already kind of scheming, and you're in the midst of that, and then you immediately go back and what. John and I want to know, what has this done? What questions did it raise for you in the lab industry?
You start looking at the history of some of these the hybrids that are out there. And, we all know the evolution where we started with acrylic hybrids, and we all know the downfalls of the acrylic hybrids. You take the proprioception away, and you put these things on the implants, and patients don't know when to stop biting. So what's the result? We got fractured denture teeth. So then the industry switches over to all zirconia. And, there's a lot of skepticism out there yet about zirconia, how it's going to last long term and what's the end result. And it was, there was some studies that said, it's a viable option, but I think you guys agree that there were some studies that say be careful, and there were some fracturing. And kind of comical, but when I was out there, I don't know if you guys remember that, but I got a text from one of my accounts that actually had one fracture when I was there.
I didn't know that happened while you were there.
While we
nice!
Were there,
I knew that happened.
So,
That's pretty cool, right?
So so it's like little hint coming down.
And it was your fault,
from
just like we were talking about in the last time you were here.
Stop breaking stuff, Brad.
Darn,
stop that.
Darn the zirconia! I just reached across the country and fractured that baby. Got
to make money somehow.
If I could only charge the second time, I would. But
seriously.
So I think now there's some skepticism out there. We're still doing a lot of zirconia. I still do believe in zirconia, but I think ever since I came back from the AO, I'm a little more cautious on zirconia. And we started talking about some other materials that are viable options out there, and we're down the engineering track right now of working with some pretty cool materials that it might be that happy medium. Something that's resilient, still monolithic, but yet not.
Well,
zirconia.
Let's talk about what options are available right now for full arch, implant restorations that, and some of them maybe that just quickly, as you see them, Brad, pros and cons of some of the fixed full arch implant restoration materials that we have now. What do you see as some good and bad about the different ones?
Fixed, nothing removable.
Yeah.
Well, we'll go with this, screw retained acrylic. It's acrylic harbors bacteria, so they kind of have a stench to them. So there's a little bit of that's negative, and they can break teeth. Advantage, they're a little more cost effective, so easier to adjust. Then the other option we go down generally is zirconia. Price is somewhat of a disadvantage, a little more pricey, but they don't absorb the bacteria into it, so they don't tend to carry that stench. They're a little bit kinder to the tissue. A lot more aesthetic. You can custom build the pink, you can custom build the porcelain, so they're by far the prettiest, most aesthetic case that we have. Disadvantage if they break, they break. It's a total remake.
What about that compared to full arch crown and bridge? Using porcelain fused some metal. What about that as an option? What do you see there? Because there were some cases we saw presented using that material as well.
You're talking about like a titanium bar with individual crowns.
Yeah, individual crowns,
you
right. And even
Absolutely.
some cast bars. They even showed some casting there as well.
Great option. Again, advantages, disadvantage, price. I mean, you get individual crowns that got to be cemented onto these bars. I don't do a lot of them just because it scares my doctor. It's hard to make any money with that. If they fracture, you're only cutting a crown off and replacing a crown. So there's an advantage for that. You got the titanium bar for strength, so you don't have any fracturing on that. So there's an advantage. So it's just the cost is what really drives everybody away of doing that. But You can actually also take titanium bars and bake titanium porcelain to them. But then if you got a fracture, you got to take that whole bar out of the patient's mouth, and then you got to rebake all of the porcelain, not just an individual crown. So I don't do a lot of those just for that reason either. So I kind of listed our two most popular type options, and that's set aside from any removable. There's obviously bar overdentures you can pop in and out.
Now, why do you think, Brad, that we're seeing? I know these studies, as you said, there are some studies showing some good about zirconia, some studies showing some concern about zirconia. Forgetting for a moment about the studies, because that's a whole other topic. What do you see as maybe the primary reason why you might see monolithic zirconia fractures?
One of the main reasons, verification. You get the implants in the patient's mouth, and you're taking a negative or an impression of that and transferring that into the laboratory. We're pouring a model on it. And everything we do is over top of that model. So if anything is microscopically off between the model and the mouth, and you go torque a zirconia product in the patient's mouth, and it's not a perfect match, you're going to stress one of those locations. You stress one of those locations, you just never know. I call it a ticking time bomb. You never know when it's going to release. And all of a sudden you get a fracture. So verification in all of these screw-retained cases is an absolute must. And there's a trick to it. I mean, there's a lot of, I've been chairside where, the doctor just starts screwing it in, and you can get all 4 or 6 screws engaged. And well, screws went in. But is the margin of the coping perfectly seated onto the transmucosal abutment in every location? That is a tactile feel. If it's a slightly subgingival and you can't see it, you're going to have to go in there and probe it. I've had people try to take x-rays, but when you have metal on metal, it's very, very hard to do that. Most of it's by visual and by feel. And that, most of the fracturing, I can usually point back to verification.
Gotcha. John and I, we have a fair amount of experience with hybrids. I think the thing that's interesting about this is that they are a very complex treatment. Requires, I think, some training beyond just normal prosthetic knowledge when it comes to dental implants. But I think, again, you see so many people, you get a lot of oral surgeons in maybe a community that maybe they've seen, what Clear Choice has done, per se. We've Clear Choice, this big conglomerate that has, pumped out a lot of hybrids, and then an oral surgery group comes back and they say, we think we can do this too. And they do it well, they place it well, but what we see is a lack of knowledge on the dentist part and a skill set that takes a lot of training. And so some of these fractures, Brad, you feel like is just a lack of knowledge and training in how to do the step-by-step process of whether it's bar wrapped in acrylic, to be honest with you, or zirconium. Verification jig is uber important.
Well, absolutely. Years ago, we were trained on, the doctors, I think, were trained on verification, where you take the floss and you intertwine it and you take the composite. And I don't blame you guys on the dental side of things, because it's a pain in the rear to do that. On chair side, it's hard to do. So then I think the onus kind of went back to the laboratory, and the responsibility started going back to the lab, where the lab we would make the verification jig. Well, what if the model's already wrong? That means I'm making basically a verification jig that's wrong, and now you have to verify it, and it's hard to verify.
And John, you and I have went to some of these new verified impressions, basically where you tie the impression copings together with titanium bars and use resin and actually pick up the verification jig in the impression.
Right.
And so, or verifying in the mouth, back to doing that again with new techniques with the titanium bars splinted between cylinders and things like that. So you try to find new ways to figure out these problems. Now, I want to go back to cost, because that seems to be like this thing you talked about. Like, maybe let's think about multipliers. This is the rock bottom, like bargain basement, like bar wrapped in acrylic. That's kind of like the mainstay, wouldn't you say, for hybrids?
Yeah, I would say
okay.
that.
So let's just consider that's like your 1x cost. Okay. So how many more times expensive is solid zirconium than bar wrapped in acrylic?
It's not necessarily twice the cost, but it's usually a couple thousand to $1,500 to $2,000 more.
So 1.5, 1.25.
So 1.25.
So 25% more. And then what about this bar we talk about? I mean, we see these cases, John, these full arch with the cemented crowns or individual crowns, and then the stacked porcelain, maybe even on titanium. We saw some pretty amazing things there. I mean, beyond.
Oh, amazing.
Amazing technicians. Bars with teeth, separated. What does that cost?
It's a good, easy 3 times the cost.
3 times the cost of bar wrapped in acrylic. So immediately there, you're like pricing yourself way out.
It depends on your market, but my market, I price myself out of it, so we tend not to play there.
So is zirconium, I mean, you don't feel like that monolithic zirconium is over? I mean,
no, not at all. No, I still think it's in the infancy stage. I think I really look back at the verification side of things, and I think a lot of that is they're undue stress and it's fracturing later. So therefore now, people are getting a little hesitant going, there's other products. Is there more resilient products out there that doesn't show?
Well, and I guess, I think for me, a lot of this comes back to the way the monolithic zirconia is being marketed. I have never ever seen a product marketed in dentistry today, full page ad, $29.95 all included from Gladwell for a product before that's a full arch implant restoration. They never marketed that with bar and acrylic, really not with overdentures, but all of a sudden monolithic zirconia is being marketed very heavily to the general dentist as being easy, unbreakable. Look at how it's a package deal from, you just pay this dollar amount and we'll do everything for you, pretty much is what it sounds like. It sounds like, and that's what dentists unfortunately want to hear, is they want to hear, package deal. This is easy. It's indestructible. You really can't miss with this. That's the way it's being marketed. And I think that, why were hybrids not marketed before monolithic zirconia?
Good question. I don't know. It's a boom. It's a market boom. It seems like zirconia just kind of swept the whole thing. Everybody started to see the single unit zirconia just sweep across the market, and I don't know if they just assume that zirconia is an end-all, do-all.
But there wasn't the accompanying training, and that's the thing I guess we're getting at, and you're getting at too, Brad, that I feel like it wasn't marketed before zirconia because people didn't know how to do it. Well, guess what? They still don't know any more than they knew before the marketing, but now they're doing it. And this is, I think, the problem is, that if you talk to even general dentists that are in study clubs that I belong to, and the whole study club's about full arch restorations, and Wes, what I'm talking about, and it's disturbing when the questions are asked. Usually not during the lecture because it's too embarrassing, but after the lecture, like, well, hey, how do you, do you use the verification jig? Do you do that every time? Or, I mean, come on, really? Do you really? And, just this lack of understanding. And again, I look back and I think before monolithic zirconia, I mean, hybrids were the first restoration done on implants. When Bronnemark first did his restorations, it was big old high water, all on 5s, because that was he wanted to splint, so it was one of the first restorations ever done, and we've done it forever.
And they were using they weren't doing single tooth replacement then, they were doing like a lot,
I mean, is it one of the most proven techniques ever? I think it is on implants. One of the most researched, one of the most talked about, the technique is very well understood, and yet, 10 years ago, general dentists didn't even know what it was, even though it was done in pros circles, not every day, because implants are still, of course, becoming more mainstream.
Oh, yeah. You wouldn't have dare heard anybody outside the realm of like maybe, if it was a general dentist, it was somebody that was in a higher education situation, things like that. Masters in the Academy of General Dentistry type situations where people had extreme training. But now it is marketed like crazy. And like I said, I think that some of this too come from the implant market, where they're like, dude, we can take people's teeth out and go all in one day and they end up with walking out with teeth.
And Wes and I we're huge fans of this. We don't want, and Brad is too. I mean, we don't want to come across as sounding like somehow we don't like this, but it's.
I think for the dental guys that are out there and the dental gals that are listening to this, Brad, what are some things that you would say, okay, look, I've done this, I've seen these things, and I went to the AO, I kind of brought to light, like, let's just back up and think about how we're doing hybrids, and maybe lay out just some general recommendations for a dentist listening to this. If they're thinking about doing one of these all on 4, all on 5, 6 cases, knowing what we saw at the AO and what you have experience with, what are you recommending?
It starts in the planning stage. Got to plan it. Get a CT and see what you're dealing with, and do a surgical guide and place those implants where you need to be. And I think there's a little bit of a free looseness there going, well, it's just a denture. It doesn't matter. I can use a transmucosal abutment. I can angulate it. Yeah, but what if you don't have to? What if you use a straight transmucosal abutment? What if you can and you only use angles where you have to? And I want to have those screw holes in the center of the tooth. There's planning things that you can do there to understand even the quality of the bone. Do I need 4 implants? Do I need 6 implants? The whole cloning of all on 4. I've never been a true believer on it because in maxilla, and you don't have the quality of the bone, you don't do all on 4. It's really not even it's not really even done in our industry.
All on 4.
That's right. Steve Carell
Exactly.
made a big deal about that. Rescuing a failed maxillary implant on all on 4 is a nightmare. And you can't add back to restorations without more failures. So, I think too, even before the planning stages, Brad, I mean, I don't know, Wes, I guess I get kind of upset about this. I feel like some people just don't even need to be doing this.
It's a little bit of a rant. I agree. I think that there are people out there that just don't.
I mean, if you're listening to the show and you're thinking about doing this, we're saying, hey, go for it, but get some education, get some education, learn how to do this well,
Picos got up and gave a great lecture. You can go to his institute and learn this. It's just not something that I think that you need to have a lot of experience. I mean, you need a lot of experience. It starts with training, and then you got this planning. What else? I mean, what else are you thinking here? I mean, what can help?
You got to follow protocol. So once you get the implants in, and you got to be stringent to that protocol. So you got planned, you got implants in. Think about that verification jig. I'd put the onus back on the dentist. That metal bar system you're talking about, we picked that up, Easy Bar. It's a simple, system. You guys have both used it, where you kind of do a measuring between the 2 cylinders, and you pick the bar of the kit. The bars are like 99 cents a piece, and you assemble these little metal bars, and you as a dentist lute them in the patient's mouth. So we've simplified that process, but I really believe that it's actually in the end the better quality, because it doesn't make more sense to you guys to just screw your cylinders in. The cylinders are seated because they're single cylinders. They're not attached to anything yet. And you assemble the bars and you lute them together and make the verification jig. Now send that to the lab. Now I guarantee I know in the mouth, which is where we want it to be the most important fit. Now I just take the model, which I don't have to deal with tissue. I don't have to deal with the patient. I just look at a model and say, oh, look at that. One of these analogs is out. And I can cut it out. And it makes it easy. So simple things of putting that onus back on the dentist and have them make the verification jig. We know it's seated. So that right there, I think, will fix the majority of our zirconia.
It's a great point, Brad.
fractures.
I think that whether you're using that system or you're just using even just a good old-fashioned, making some hexes out of GC pattern resin and having the dentist join them in the mouth. I mean, whatever you can do, I agree with that. I mean, I'm a big fan in this situation of make the dentist do that work, because let them own the problem if there's a problem. And I know that's the big thing with the lab is, I know that that's not an easy thing to necessarily prove what happened, because when something goes wrong, but you're seeing again that you have enough experience with to say, hey, this is our typical problem step. The rest of this situation is relatively straightforward. That's the impression step, which is hard, and everybody tells you it's not hard is not probably doing it right. It's hard. And, be ready for that. It's going to be hard. You might have to dig impression copings out of somebody's mouth with and then doing a good verification and doing it right. And, those 2 steps, you mess one of them up, you can still catch it in the second one,
What I say right now is you need to go out and find a mentor. You need to get a study club where there's somebody there that will come to your office that's done multiple cases like this. If you find some kind of a lab guy that's done a lot of cases, that they can get their fingers wet and get in the mouth with you and just figure this stuff out and really understand the bolts and the nuts and the bolts of this whole procedure. It is not a procedure that you want to be skipping steps on. And
part of that protocol is even understanding your pieces and parts, because you got a transmucosal abutment that goes down into the implant, and we're all used to doing general abutments into the implant, which, your torque values, 30, 35, 25 Newton centimeters, depending on your implant system. But then you go to a hybrid, and now you have a nano screw or a prosthetic screw that holds the prosthetic into that abutment.
Right.
Well, those usually are around 10, 15 Newton centimeters. So right there, those little things, if you don't know that, doctor, you're gonna mess up. And I've had it where, the doctor grabbed it and they torque it in at 35 Newton centimeters. And about 50% of the time, guess what happens? The head of the screw strips off.
That's right.
And now you got a mess because now you got half your screw sticking in that abutment, and that abutment's a $230 abutment.
And two, I hate to say this, and again, I think we don't want to tell people we're talking them out of doing these, because I think if you get the proper training, you can. But again, we go back to the AO, and some of the things that we heard is like, well, we're getting rid of flanges now.
Yeah.
I mean, like, a flange is not an option. I mean, we heard it, John. It's like, take them off. So that, what does that mean to you? Is that means is that if someone needs true lip support, enough lip support that they require a flange, guess what? You're not doing a zirconium hybrid. You're doing a bar overdenture, a removable prosthetic. What does that mean? More expensive. It's like, and I get it too, is like, well, I just want to do one to try one. And that might be the one and only that you do in 10 years. Man. Let me just tell you, do you know that you need to take that thing off every year, and now recommended that you replace the screws every year? I mean, like, these things start to add up. It's like when you dive into this, you're buying that patient.
Yeah, when we say things like, this is a lifetime restoration, we just need to eliminate that from our vocabulary.
It's not it might not be a lifetime restoration. It is a managed case from there.
Yeah, and you might need revisions. I guess that's the word that I heard years ago, is that to say to the patient, this could need revisions over the years.
I like that
they
word.
equated that to kind of the plastic surgeon talking about how plastic surgery can need revisions, if in the future. And I think that's a good term to describe what we can have to do with these restorations if an implant fails, if you have to do maintenance. And getting to the heart of that too, Wes, talk about why they want to eliminate flanges before we go on to the next topic. Is let's talk about what the AO, what did we hear at the AO about reasons behind that?
Well, let me just tell you right now, a flange in this type of prosthetic, whether it's the upper or the lower, creates a situation where the patient cannot cleanse the implants. And you would think, well, they can take a water pick up there. And listen, I've taken these things off. I've taken several off last week, just part of a normal protocol. And it's stuff, there's stuff underneath there.
Every time.
I don't care who. Every time. Now, it might not be a lot in some people. It's less in zirconium, most definitely. It doesn't adhere to zirconium, but it gets stuck. So what are we doing? With the flange, you're trapping it in there. It doesn't fly. One would say, well, Wes, that means that patient's going to whistle now in the maxillary anterior because it's not quite sealed. No, not necessarily. You might still have a kissing, quote unquote, to the tissue designed prosthetic, but no flange. So you have to be ready to own it. When you go to screw retained, that patient can cleanse. The flanges on these prosthetics will lead to implant problems. Yeah. And that's basically what came out.
And even too, that starts back at the surgery and talking about the planning. How are we going to do the surgery completely differently?
Right.
If you're thinking about concavity, convexity here, you won't have to make a big change in the surgical protocol.
You're right. If you don't know how to do dentures, Brad, should you be doing hybrids?
No.
No. If you don't know how to do dentures out there, don't attempt a hybrid. Why is that?
Occlusion. Got to understand occlusion. Got to understand balanced occlusion, and there's some skepticism out there. You get
But
6
I think
implants.
balance is where it's going back.
I still think balance is where we try to hit it.
We were equilibrating one this week that we and I were working on. Is it's about putting it in balance.
And there's a controversy out there. I'm screwed in implants. Can I do cuspid rise? So do I do balanced? I tend to do more lingualized balanced type occlusions. So. But you need to understand that. Absolutely. You're going to get
also
yourself in
vertical
trouble.
requirements. I think it goes back to dentures as well. When we're talking about dentures, it was pre-pros surgery. When it's implants, it's understanding vertical requirements of the restoration. It's a very similar idea, with how do we really understand, we don't want to use monolithic zirconia simply because we think we can get away with less vertical. We want to understand that we should be able to use a restoration like that because we have plenty of room to do whatever we want. And it's just another option rather than pushing the limits of vertical. And again, goes back to understanding where's the incised ledge position going to go? Just like we talked about many times, Wes, it's where our 8-9 going to be. And when we know where that is, it drives everything, just like it always did with dentures.
You got to keep in mind, we're talking about options here too. And I get case after case after case on my desk of, Wes, you mentioned earlier, well, you don't want to have flange. Well, guess what? I don't have vertical. Well, I can't do a bar over denture, but I got to have a flange because we had buccal plate loss. We had buccal bone loss. Sometimes you do have to take, and what it is understanding the pros and the cons and presenting that to your patient to say, look, if I don't have vertical and I have to do zirconia and I want the best aesthetics, I have to do zirconia. I have buccal bone loss. I have to have a flange for lip support. What do? You do the zirconia, but up front, and you explain that to your patient of the pros and the cons of that, and maybe there's a little bit more maintenance, and you got to take that off, and you got to clean it a little bit more often because the disadvantaged things are going to get caught underneath. So I don't want everybody out there thinking, hey, I can't do zirconia because I can't do flange. Every case is different, and sometimes you just have to know what you can or can't do, and what the pros and cons are going to be for each one.
Very true.
So you feel like coming back from this, you're going to be more upfront with your doctors about these kinds
Absolutely.
of things?
Absolutely. To help treatment plan up front and make sure that they understand the pros and the cons of each one, so they can prepare their patient and make sure that the patient's well aware of what's going to happen in the end result, And that's all, some of the things I also learned is, we kind of talked about, the really expensive individual crown type deal. I don't play much in. My mainstay is my zirconia and my denture type screwed in. I came back kind of fired up about some new products that we can engineer. There's some other options for us to bring to the market. When I came back from AO, I got a little more excited about some other options that we could present to the doctors as far as some restorative options. The two that are mainstay in our lab are the screw retained denture and then the screw retained zirconia. So is there another product that we can, come out and develop? And there were some guys at the AO that have been playing in this realm. So we came back and, my engineer and I sat down and we thought, well, let's see if we can't take a bar that's more of like a hybrid fiber type bar. So it's a millable plastic instead of metal or zirconia. And plastic, you have a little bit more resiliency and a little bounce to it, so it's a little more forgiving, not quite so rigid. So we're starting to engineer a fibered bar that's a milled, very strong substructure to replace the zirconia. And then there's some new products that are on the market that, I'll say the word 3M Ultimate. It was a product that came out for a little while, and now it's kind of phased away because there was zirconia in it, and I have some debonding problems with that product, but more on the crown side, not the inlay-onlay. But there's some products that got rid of the zirconia, and they're still of like a millable polymer. So you basically mill that out over top of the bar, and you cement the two together.
Is that kind of like an iteration of the old Bell glass type stuff?
Yeah, it's millable though.
Okay.
So yeah, it's like more of a composite. It's a pucka composite, fully millable, comes in different shades.
Like tri-shaded composite?
Some of them are coming out tri-shaded, some are monolithic, so there's some options out there.
So you're thinking that you could take this millable bar that's whatever made out of
super
strong fiber, kind of like Rib-On,
And that's what we mill to the multi-unit abutments.
Right. And then you screw that down, and then you could cement this in the lab over that.
That's correct. Yeah, that's correct. And then we'd use a composite like a Shofu makes a composite that's multiple layered pink, or Bredent has a multiple layer pink, and you layer the pink on in a composite. It ends up being a 1-unit deal. You cement the two. We do it in the laboratory. But, is that the compromise? It's monolithic. You're not going to break denture teeth. It's not zirconia. It's got a little more resilience to it. We're looking, it seems like the wearability of this product's been really good. The aesthetics has been very good. So we're looking at rolling this out probably the next 30 days and start going down this road.
What do you feel like this is a replacement for, or is it?
I don't think it's a replacement. I think might be the happy medium. I'm still zirconia is a viable option. Don't get me wrong. We're not trying to chase anybody away from it. We just want everybody to be more cautious and understanding on how you go through your protocol to get success. If there's an interim in between there that, might be a little bit more cost effective, because, right now you go to dentures, you still got to break teeth. You go to zirconia, it's kind of the Cadillac. Is there a middle of the road that you don't have to break teeth?
There's companies out there like we know K-Genics out of Memphis, Tennessee, that I know you had some experience with them. I've actually used to use them for milling all my bar wrapped in acrylic cases, but they have kind of a hybrid type thing where they would mill a bar like a traditional titanium bar substructure, and they have processed the crowns, individual zirconium crowns, to be cemented, and then they have the acrylic pink, that's kind of wrapped up around the zirconium teeth. So that's kind of this hybrid thing, but that's still revolving titanium. Do you feel like that the resin part is strong enough, like to act as like a bar? That kind of scares me a little bit when you say resin, because I'm thinking like, is this really a viable thing for a patient long term, or is this like an interim situation?
No, it's not an interim, and chemistry isn't a great thing, and they keep coming out with new products more and more. The hard part is what kind of R&D is done on them,
Right.
Is there a ton of R&D on it? Not yet. It's coming. But it's a permanent product here. We're not talking about an interim denture by any means, but we're gonna have to watch the data on it. And
so how much do you know flexing and like that kind of thing? Have you looked at that?
We're looking at it right now. Yeah. My engineer's looking at, I don't trust any companies that are out there. They tell you one thing and we try to test it ourselves.
Well, we were talking about that over dinner, how you switching zirconium brands occasionally, because you're just not happy with some of the results that you get. And you end up coming back to some of these companies that are tried and true, that, I don't know. I mean, you just kind of get a little bit disappointed sometimes whenever you get something and it's not really what it meant it was.
Everybody tries to jump into the market, and you got to be a little bit careful because the end product isn't always better. Sometimes it's worse.
So pink composite. I mean, how aesthetic can we get now with this? I mean, I've seen some of this gradia that we've layered in, with some of our PMMAs just to keep the patient happy during that, prototype phase. I mean, is this composite that you're talking about, this symphony type material, is it good?
It's made by Shofu. It's been out for quite some time. We just started playing with it. I was unfamiliar with it, so I went to the AO and I got some names from the lab group. Just one of them that we're playing with. Multi-layers, got some flowables, it's got some regular composite, you can layer it in, and it looks gorgeous on the aesthetic side of things.
John, you can imagine, let's say, okay, a year or two from now, after testing is done and things are moving down the road, and this comes out and it's like, dude, this stuff is strong, okay? And you're thinking a composite full arch restoration, milled, okay? Wearability. Well, you know how some of these composites wear. I mean, they've been shown to wear very, very nice. And think about repairability. You could repair it in the mouth, with just normal whatever we use, Filtech or, something like that, or even, what is it? Whatever you use.
I use Estelite.
Right, Estelite. I knew I was saying. So, or Cosmodent or something like that. I mean, that's kind of exciting because I think it's easier to deal with, but then you got to make sure it's strong enough because...
Yeah, because the thing that concerns me is we've never had composite that I know of like this rigidly attached to implants. I mean, we've had composite, in a tooth as an inlay or onlay where there's flex, and the composite and the tooth flex well together, and we know it wears well. But you know, I think about Relax Ultimate, for instance, and even those words make me nervous, man. When I hear Relax Ultimate, and then I hear a new product that's kind of like got that. I know that Relax Ultimate wasn't all bad, but I get concerned about, again, you're talking about a material that is meant to flex, yes, but it's attached to something that does not flex by design. And so, you know, I don't know. It'll be very interesting to see, because we know it's going to deflect. And the question is, how far can it deflect? And then the question is, too, how many times can it deflect before it fractures? And like you say, there's a lot of good things about that, though. If we could repair it, you're talking about a patient has a little whistle. Well, you just take it off, add a little composite to it. You know, that'd be sweet. That'd be a nice thing to be able to do for somebody. You could easily mill another one if you needed to have a backup. Things like that. There's a lot of advantages. But I'm an old man, Wes. I like to see data. So I'm excited to see this product.
I agree with you. This it's interesting. I mean, I've seen some crazy things before,
and I think that too, that you mentioned, and the other side of the coin is going to something like what Kgenics is trying to do with AccuFrame.
The problem I think it's a cool product, but I mean, the pink just drives me crazy. Being able to put denture pink up against zirconium, and you do facial cutbacks and all that kind of stuff on the zirconium, and then you got denture pink running up in between them. I mean, it looks okay.
I think you can do nice things with acrylic, though. I think you can do nice things.
I think you can, but I mean, like you look at what Pico's presented. Basically, when they do dual arches, they're doing a upper zirconium hybrid, full monolithic zirconium, and then they're following it up on the lower with bar wrapped in acrylic, because they want
a failure point.
They want a failure point. And they would rather it be in the bar wrapped in acrylic on the lower versus the top. So they're choosing aesthetics on the top and longevity on the lower. They're choosing wear capabilities.
Right.
So I mean, Brad, going back to like what things you've changed, one, you've kind of just rethinking this whole hybrid thing. It just kind of brought it back to just rethinking it, making sure you're doing your right things. You're dotting your P's and Q's, dotting your P's and Q's, whatever that means, right? Dotting your I's, crossing your T's. But you also went back to your lab and you raised some questions, and you said, these are things that you just wanted to change, or you felt like that there was just something missing, and you got rejuvenated. I mean, what happened?
Well, pros and cons. Remember, lab businesses, we're here for options. Every doctor's different, every patient's different, every case is different. So, we're supposed to give options. So I felt like there was a little bit of a disconnect, and we needed something in between. And I do think this is a viable option. I think this is something we're going to chase and do some more testing ourselves. And I think it kind of fits the niche for some patients. And again, not everyone, but that's kind of what I've been chasing, is just fill a little bit of a gap that I felt like we had.
Now
So, and I just looked up the megapascals. Is 480 megapascals of compression strength on that product that we're using. So, kind of interesting. And you're right, John. Everybody's kind of chasing this. Well, they say shock absorber in the material, but then you're screwing them to implants that don't have any shock absorber in them. So. Not sure if that's the real sell factor. I'm more or less looking for how do we not break teeth and maintain aesthetics. At the same time, is what I'm trying to find out.
And I'm excited to see how that works out. I mean, that's what everybody wants, and I think that's an option. And I think we get some of that with like milled PMMA. It's like kind of that idea. If we could take that idea of milled PMMA, but give us something that's got more durability, something that doesn't stain as much, something that can be stronger. Kind of following along with that same idea that we've done so much work already with milled PMMA, even for temporary restorations on the way to zirconia. I mean, they can look pretty darn good, even in a material that's really not a great aesthetic material. And so, man, if we could take that a step further, that'd be sweet. Now, what about composite? We're talking about composite for like full arch restorations. One of the things I know they talked a lot about, I think that we talked a lot about as well, is What about just composite being used as the tissue replacement for these difficult aesthetic cases where, we've talked so much over the years about pink porcelain and how challenging pink porcelain is. What are the times, did what we saw there change your way of thinking about composite as a replacement for pink porcelain, or as an alternative, or do you still see pink porcelain being the thing that you would go to, or is there a place for composite? And if so, how do we use that?
Yeah, I just want to clarify something, John. The new product that we're talking about, which has occlusal forces on it that they look like teeth, you mill it out of a puck, is a nano ceramic, new on the market, not composite, nano ceramic, new classification,
Okay, I was
new
confused
FDA classification. Then you put composite on the tissue area on top of this nano ceramic. Just so we're straight up on that. So as soon as you say composite, everybody freaks out because you're right, it stains, it discolors, things happen with composite. New classification, new FDA approval, brand new classification. Now let's talk about composite. Your direct question is, if I use composite, it's always in the tissue area, and it's always because of an aesthetic compromise. We had bone loss where we have to create a flange, and the lab track that I took was pretty intriguing because, you like say, well, don't use composite. It's a viable option. You have to use composite. It can be done, and it's done. And almost the 3 courses that I took in the lab track, all of them talked about this. Ceramic porcelain is more of a long-term option. It doesn't accept staining. It usually doesn't break off. A little bit more limited on some coloring in that, but it's not always, it's not always able to be used in the situation. They talked about the doctors actually applying it chair side, and that would be the composite. So if you have a bony defect and the doctor wants to actually fill in that bony defect, using composite chair side like the Shofu composite or the Gradia, definite viable option. The thing that they warned us all about is contamination. If you contaminate, it's saliva or blood contaminated, it's lights out. It's a bad bond.
What are you bonding this to?
You're bonding it to ceramic. So
definitely. If you contaminate it, you're done.
Yep, you're done. The other thing they talked about is maintenance. The term I heard, or the timeline I heard every time in every course, is 3 years. Just prepare your patient. About every 3 years, you're going to need to come and do a little cutback on the composite, and you're going to have to come back, and you're going to have to add a little composite because it could tarnish and stain, which tells me that those composites haven't gone real far since they have for years. They're still going to accept some staining on them. But it was used in everyday dentistry in compromised situations.
Yeah. So, and is it just cheaper? I mean, what were they saying? Was it like, so let's say I've got a 4-unit restoration here, okay? And so I'm going to ask for 4 units. You're going to charge me for 4 units, okay? Now, if I say, well, Brad, I'm going to need pink porcelain in this case, you're going to charge me for the pink porcelain, okay? So how does this better that why don't I just go ahead and have you stack the pink porcelain? Why were they doing that?
I think pink porcelain's the way to go. I think there's, there may be
You're very good at it. I mean,
that's the
you're
trick.
Very good at it.
You got to find a laboratory
seen some
that
of these
understands.
cases.
Oh yeah, man. I mean, if you get somebody who knows what they're doing, like Brad's lab does, then you can get a great result, which I think you can get a great result with composite as well.
Absolutely.
But man, you got to be trained. Just like you got to be trained to do that. Just like the lab has to learn how to do pink porcelain.
I don't see any cost advantage here.
There's not.
There's no cost advantage.
Why is this even being talked about?
Well, I guess to me it's being talked about because you've got situations where maybe the lab doesn't do a great job. Or
I think that's one issue.
Yeah.
I think the other thing is things change in the patient's mouth. And one of the sessions that I took is, everything was good, everything was fine, and then all of a sudden some things changed. And all of a sudden you had a defect that appeared after the restoration.
There
in the
you
patient's
go.
mouth.
That's what I was looking for. You're right.
Now the onus is back on the doctor to go, okay, this thing's in, if it's cement retained, what are you going to do?
So like, that one really high aesthetic case we did years ago where we had that one lady that rejected those implants like 3 times. Real pretty lady, number 9 or something like that, was missing. And we had that big defect that went way up. And when we did it, man, it looked amazing.
Yep.
So let's say she comes back next year and she's like, man, Wes, a gap's opened up. Why? You can't take it off.
Nope. So what are your options? Now your composite comes in. Now you
So,
become
are you gonna come down and do that for me?
now you become a ceramist, my
I'm
friend.
not doing that because how often does it happen? I'm asking you, John.
Yeah, it's why.
I mean, seriously, you're going to hire him to come down there and fix that.
You almost have no choice if you're trying.
I wouldn't attempt. I would probably attempt it, but I would probably fail.
Yeah.
Well, if you feed me as good as you did tonight with that big pancake and chicken, I'd probably be happy to come down again.
Yeah.
Man.
For just pancakes alone, I'm sure he wouldn't charge you anything.
Next time I'm eating.
But yeah, no, I mean, I'm not good enough. You know, I mean, I'd love to say that I can be Christian Coachman, but I'm not good enough. You know, and I've tried. I've played around with it on some interim restorations a couple times with Gradia gum shades. It's
very difficult. I can't do it.
It's tough. I mean, the shade guides are totally different. The way you have to think about value is totally different. So I just, you know, I'm not there. And so I agree with you, Wes. I think you end up having to say, hey, you know, come on down to the office and let's basically do some ceramics.
So this is a toolbox.
And
then,
how do you
what
even
you're
keep it
saying, Brad.
isolated? I mean, geez.
Yeah, it's a toolbox.
It's a toolbox.
And the doctor calls and says, Brad, you know the restoration we did 5 years ago. There's a space that's opened up underneath. It's dry. The patient nuts are getting lettuce stuck there. What's your solution? Well, I got this great product. It's called composite.
Yep.
And
That's it. Don't contaminate it.
Don't contaminate
Or it won't
Do you want to do it, or
Right.
do you want me to come and do it?
Multi-layer it, make it look
I
pretty.
think it's a service thing. Well, man, this is, you know, another little thing you got in the back of your hat, you know, that you can help people out with. You know, don't forget it. I think it's a great tip.
Yeah,
I think it
absolutely.
is.
And I think that, you know, what we learn from doing this show today is, first of all, I mean, once again, props to the Academy of Osseointegration. I know we sound like a shill for this organization, but
Your first time going.
Oh, it was awesome. I can't believe, I can't believe that's specialists there. At the majority of specialists, you should be at the lab track. You know how many people were in the lab track? There was 12 people sitting in those chairs at the lab track.
Oh, man.
12.
That's sad.
And you had some high-end ceramists that were coming in there, some doctors with talent,
You had
experience.
that guy get up and talk about how he was, you know, he couldn't find people to come to his in the United States. I knew that got at you.
Oh, it got at me. When you have basically a foreign lab technician that stands up at the AO meeting in front of a bunch of specialists, and how many people were in that room?
Oh, 1,000.
You know, so you're speaking to all these doctors, and somebody stands up and says, you know, well, I'd like your training to be brought to the United States, and his comment was, I won't do it. And she asked why, and he's like, well, because they always want it cheap, fast, and quick.
Right.
In the United States, and you know, I do everything high end and right, and we think through our processes, and
That's a cut.
That hurts.
That's a cut.
That hurts.
Yeah, it hurts.
there's
You
no
know, and
market
then
for
I
that
think-
in the U.S. is basically what he said.
And then I think, and I hope that with the dental guys, you guys are basically bringing some of that awareness to that, and on
we're
the
not
lab
saying
side,
you can't get this stuff anywhere else. Like, you know, I mean, Steve Chu, Dennis Tarnow,
Spears.
They speak. Yeah, they speak Spear. They speak at different places. What we're saying, though, is this is kind of that kickoff meeting for the entire year.
Yep.
It sets the pace. I really believe that from now on. It's just kind of like the meeting to go to. And once you've went to this meeting, you're good to go for the year.
Yeah, you're not going to see anything new for the whole year, most likely, unless you're at a real, you know, specific
Like
place.
maybe an ADA meeting or something like that, you might catch a little pearl here and there. But man, this is a good meeting, and it's sad that you're right that general dentists don't
Or
take
lab
advantage.
techs.
Or lab techs
lab
don't take
techs should
advantage.
be there too.
I mean, I think it's great that you went. So
Yeah, and one of the
great
things that
time.
we, you know, as we close, you know, this episode, you know, again, yeah, we encourage you, you know, they're listening or watching the show, to check out some training like that. I know we keep on harping on that, but you know, everything we've talked about today. I mean, how many times have we said, you know, training, think through your processes. You know, make sure that you get your steps right, that you plan cases correctly.
get a mentor.
Yeah, exactly. This all comes back to the same words we
And
keep
guess
saying.
what? A mentor can be a lab guy.
Absolutely. Yeah. If you find a good lab technician, that's a mentor.
I agree, and you know, start with finding a good lab too. You know, you mentioned, you know, these prosthetics aren't for everybody. They're not for every laboratory either. You know, and not every lab should jump into this. We didn't even get in. I could have geeked out on you guys on milling strategies, on milling machines, and burr wear, and you know, zirconia is chalk and it can fracture easily, and you could be inherently causing fractures in your zirconia in the laboratory. I could geek out on all that stuff. Make sure you find a lab that knows how to mill zirconia. This isn't a single unit crown anymore. You know, this is 12, 14 teeth across one arch, and you got to know what you're doing, and even layering your glass.
One of the things I would like to to call for is if you guys have fractures out there, post them. Put them on our Twitter, man.
Tweet
Link
us a picture of your fractures. Yeah. I'll tell you what. I will tweet when this episode goes live. I'll tweet a zirconia fracture that I had. That'll be our thing. Is this you? Because this happened to Wes.
That's right. Even the dental guys have fractures, man. Because but yeah, show us your fractures. That sounds sexy. And come on,
Sounds
baby,
like a great show title there.
So, but we want to see what's really going on in real world dentistry. Because you guys that are struggling through this stuff, you're seeing problems. Tell us what you think about this. Was this useful to you? Are you going to go check out the AO? Do you have questions about where you can get training? Do you have some ideas about where you've been that's given you great training on how to do these? What, if there are lab technicians, probably if there's some lab technicians that catch this show, what are you up to? What's going on in your lab? What are you seeing as problems? What do you see the future as? We want you to check out our social media. We want you to definitely follow us on Twitter, to like us on Facebook, get involved with us as a dental guys. Once again, we want to thank Brad for being with us this evening. Brad always gives us good stuff and good insight, so we really appreciate him being a part of the Dental Guys. And we look forward to being back with you guys next time. We're going to continue to bring you quality because we are the Dental Guys.